Just curious. What device are you watching on? Phone, TV, laptop? Comment below.
I remember the exact moment my world tilted off its axis that ordinary Thursday afternoon in Columbus, Ohio, when I sat hunched over my computer screen at the insurance office, sifting through endless claims reports that blurred into one another under the harsh fluorescent lights, and suddenly my phone vibrated insistently on the desk beside me, pulling me from the monotony with a notification from the family group chat that included my ex-husband Tom and his extended clan, the one we'd maintained uneasily since our divorce 2 years earlier, primarily for coordinating Lily's visitation schedule. The message from Tom popped up first, stark and unapologetic in its brevity, despite the circumstances. Reading simply that they were already boarding the flight to Orlando for the long-awaited Disney trip, and I needed to come get Lily right away because she had been left at the gate. A revelation that sent a jolt through my body like electricity from a live wire, causing my coffee mug to tip precariously and spill across the keyboard as I fumbled to scroll back through the thread, piecing together the nightmare that had unfolded while I toiled away oblivious in my cubicle. There were earlier exchanges about the excitement of the trip, Lily's 8-year-old enthusiasm bubbling through in her emoji-filled texts about meeting Elsa and riding Space Mountain. A promise Tom had made to her months ago as a way to mend the fences frayed by our separation. But then the tone shifted abruptly with Emily, Tom's younger sister and the self-appointed family organizer, suggesting a last-minute adjustment to the boarding group that somehow excluded Lily, followed by Tom's curt update about the oversight and her reply dismissing the whole incident as nothing to fuss over, words that ignited a fury in me so intense it drowned out the hum of office chatter around me and propelled me to my feet, snatching my purse and keys without a word to my coworker who stared in confusion as I bolted for the elevator. The drive to John Glenn International Airport consumed what felt like an eternity compressed into 20 frantic minutes, my old sedan weaving through rush-hour traffic on Interstate 70 while my mind raced ahead with horrifying possibilities. Imagining my little girl standing alone amid the throng of hurried travelers, her small frame dwarfed by the massive departure boards and the indifferent shuffle of suitcases on wheels, tears undoubtedly streaming down her cheeks as she clutched the strap of her backpack with the Disney princesses printed on it, the one she'd packed meticulously the night before under my supervision, filling it with snacks and her favorite stuffed animal for the flight that was supposed to be the highlight of her young life. Regret clawed at me for having trusted Tom with the drop-off that morning, handing over our daughter with a quick hug and a reminder to text when they landed, believing that despite our rocky history, he would at least prioritize her safety above any lingering resentments from the custody battles that had dragged on in family court. Yet here I was, heart pounding against my ribcage like a trapped bird, cursing under my breath at every delay from construction zones and slow drivers who seemed oblivious to my desperation signaled by the blaring horn I leaned on more than once. By the time I screeched into the short-term parking lot, tires squealing against the asphalt, and sprinted toward the terminal with my badge flapping against my chest, sweat beading on my forehead despite the crisp autumn air, I spotted her immediately through the glass doors of the arrivals area, seated on a hard plastic bench beside a uniformed gate agent who looked relieved to see me approaching. Lily's face pale and streaked with the remnants of tears while she absent-mindedly colored in a complimentary airport activity book, her pigtails slightly askew from the ordeal that had clearly shaken her to the core. Relief washed over me in a tidal wave as I dropped to my knees in front of her, enveloping her in my arms and inhaling the familiar scent of strawberry shampoo mingled with the faint airport tang of pretzels and jet fuel, whispering assurances that everything was okay now and Mommy was here, even as questions burned in my throat about how this could have happened under the watch of people who were supposed to love her unconditionally. The agent explained kindly that Lily had been calm but confused, waiting patiently after Emily instructed her to stay put for a moment while the group sorted tickets, a moment that stretched into abandonment as the plane taxied away without her. And I nodded numbly, signing the necessary forms while fighting the urge to demand footage or names right then and there, my focus solely on bundling Lily into a protective cocoon as we made our way back to the car, stopping briefly at a kiosk for a vanilla soft-serve cone to coax a tentative smile from her lips. Her voice small and wavering as she recounted the confusion of watching her cousins wave goodbye through the glass before disappearing down the jetway. Once buckled safely into her booster seat, I pulled out my phone again and dialed Tom on speakerphone, the highway stretching out before us as we headed home to our modest ranch-style house on the east side of town. And when he answered with that practiced nonchalance he reserved for awkward conversations, I unleashed a torrent of controlled rage, describing the scene I'd walked into and accusing him directly of negligence that bordered on cruelty. His responses laced with excuses about boarding pressures and refund policies that rang hollow against the backdrop of Lily's soft sniffles from the back seat. He promised to sort it out upon landing, suggesting makeup tickets or a future outing, but I cut him off sharply, emphasizing that no amount of mouse ears could erase the terror etched into our daughter's eyes. And especially not after Emily's flippant group chat dismissal that minimized the trauma as if it were a minor scheduling hiccup rather than a profound betrayal of trust. Hanging up just as we turned into our driveway where the familiar sight of the swing set in the backyard offered a sliver of normalcy amid the storm brewing inside me. That evening, after tucking Lily into bed with an extra chapter from her favorite Roald Dahl book, her eyelids finally fluttering shut after repeated reassurances that the family would apologize and make amends, I retreated to the living room couch with a glass of cheap Merlot, replaying the day's events in my mind while scrolling through the chat history once more, noticing for the first time a hastily deleted message from Emily sent just before the boarding alert, something vague about streamlining the group to avoid complications with extra arrangements, a phrase that struck me as oddly pointed and personal, hinting at underlying tensions perhaps rooted in the ongoing disputes over holiday schedules or even the alimony payments that Tom grumbled about during our rare civil exchanges. As the house settled into quiet darkness broken only by the distant hum of neighborhood traffic, another notification chimed softly, this one a private text from Tom's mother Evelyn, who had always played the peacemaker role in the family dynamics, expressing vague sympathy and mentioning that Emily had been under unusual stress lately from her own career setbacks, a detail that piqued my curiosity and sowed seeds of suspicion about whether this incident was a careless error or something more deliberately orchestrated to undermine my place in Lily's life, leaving me staring at the screen long into the night, resolve hardening within me to uncover the truth and ensure that those responsible faced consequences far more memorable than a simple apology. Waking up the next morning to the aroma of fresh coffee brewing in our kitchen felt like a fragile truce with the previous day's chaos, as sunlight filtered through the curtains onto Lily's drawings scattered across the breakfast table where she sat in her pajamas, meticulously arranging cereal loops into patterns that resembled the fireworks she'd missed at Disney, her chatter filling the air with innocent observations about how forts made from couch cushions could be just as magical as any theme park castle, a resilience in her 8-year-old spirit that both warmed my heart and fueled the undercurrent of anger still simmering from the abandonment that had upended our routine so abruptly. I joined her with a plate of scrambled eggs and toast, forcing a cheerful tone while recounting a silly story from my own childhood about a family road trip gone wrong involving a flat tire and a picnic in a ditch. Drawing a giggle from her that eased the tension knotting my shoulders, yet beneath the domestic normalcy my mind replayed Evelyn's late-night text about Emily's stress, wondering if it masked deeper resentments tied to the family dynamics that had always positioned me as the interloper since Tom and I split, our marriage dissolving under the weight of his long work hours in sales and my determination to prioritize Lily's stability over his sporadic affections. As Lily finished her breakfast and dashed off to the living room to build her pillow empire, I lingered over my second cup, pulling out my phone to delve deeper into the group chat archives, scrolling past the superficial pleasantries of birthday wishes and recipe shares to uncover patterns in Emily's contributions that often carried a subtle edge, like her comments during custody hearings about how single moms like me needed to toughen up. for the realities of shared parenting, phrases that now struck me as laced with the kind of jealousy born from her own stalled career in marketing and a string of failed relationships that left her 35 and unmarried in a family that prized traditional milestones. That pattern crystallized into a plan as I watched Lily lose herself in play, her laughter echoing like a reminder that while she bounced back with kid-like elasticity, I couldn't let the slight go unaddressed without some form of reckoning that would sting without descending into outright war. So I turned to the online world where suburban moms like those in our Columbus neighborhood aired grievances on forums dedicated to everything from PDA drama to vacation horror stories, creating an anonymous profile on the local parent network site that I'd lurked on before for school supply tips, but never contributed to until now. With careful cropping to protect Lily's identity, I uploaded a blurred screenshot of the infamous group chat exchange, captioning it with a narrative that painted the scene vividly without exaggeration. A family jetting off to the mouse house while leaving a wide-eyed child at the gate, complete with Emily's dismissive reply that downplayed the panic as mere fussing. And I added a wry touch of humor by quipping that some family magic came with an invisibility cloak for the least deserving members. Hitting post before second thoughts could derail the impulse that felt both liberating and a tad reckless in its potential to boomerang back on us all. The response built gradually at first, a trickle of supportive comments from fellow parents sharing their own tales of holiday exclusions and logistical nightmares, but by midday it snowballed into a thread buzzing with outrage. Virtual high fives for calling out the entitlement, and even a few shares to broader social circles that amplified the reach beyond our zip code, leaving me with a satisfied smirk as I imagined Emily scrolling through her feed during what should have been carefree poolside lounging in Orlando. Tom's call came through around 2 in the afternoon, his voice strained over the line as if he'd been rehearsing excuses amid the palm trees and churros, pleading innocence in the mix-up and insisting that Emily's stress from a recent job loss had clouded her judgment. A detail that aligned with Evelyn's hint, but carried the whiff of deflection when he quickly pivoted to blaming the airline's group boarding policies rather than owning the oversight directly. I listened with feigned patience while stirring soup for lunch, spotting the lie in his overly earnest tone that echoed the same one he'd used during our separation to minimize his role in the emotional drift. Pressing him gently on why Lily's inclusion hadn't been double-checked given the months of build-up, and he faltered just enough to admit that Emily had suggested separating the tickets to simplify things, without elaborating on what complications she meant, a slip that confirmed my suspicions of targeted exclusion perhaps, aimed at testing his loyalties or undermining my influence in Lily's affections. Hanging up after assuring him the post was just a vent and not a declaration of war, I felt the first wave of backlash ripple through as Emily's texts bombarded my inbox, a flurry of accusations about pettiness and ruining their hard-earned escape. Her words dripping with that familiar condescension that made me chuckle inwardly at the irony of her lecturing on drama while orchestrating the abandonment. Yet, as the afternoon waned and Lily napped off her play-induced exhaustion, I refreshed the forum to find the thread evolving with new replies, one in particular from a user claiming insider knowledge that caught my eye, hinting at a premeditated angle to the trip involving financial pressures on Tom that Emily was exploiting to pull him away from post-divorce obligations. A vague but tantalizing clue that suggested this wasn't mere oversight, but part of a larger scheme to reshape family alliances in ways that could threaten the fragile balance I'd fought so hard to maintain for Lily's sake, leaving me unsettled as evening shadows lengthened across the room, pondering the evidence piling up like storm clouds on the horizon. As Friday morning unfolded with the typical rhythm of school routines in our quiet Columbus neighborhood, where the leaves crunched underfoot on the walk to the bus stop and Lily waved goodbye with her backpack slung over one shoulder, clutching a drawing of our Pillow Fort adventure that she'd insisted on showing the driver for a laugh, I carried the weight of the forum thread's escalating buzz into my workday at the insurance office, fielding calls about fender benders while stealing glances at my phone to track the comments that had now veered into speculation about family vendettas and custody manipulations. Each new reply stoking my resolve even as it amplified the risks of this digital skirmish spilling over into real legal threats from Tom, who had hinted in his last message about consulting his attorney over what he called my smear campaign. The office break room offered no real respite, with colleagues chattering about weekend plans that included tailgates for the Buckeyes game, a staple of Ohio life that reminded me how insulated our personal dramas felt amid the broader tapestry of community events. Yet by noon an email from Tom's lawyer arrived in my inbox. A curt notice warning against further public disclosures that could prejudice ongoing custody arrangements and potentially lead to supervised visits for Lily if I persisted in what they framed as vindictive behavior. A development that twisted my stomach into knots as I imagined the courtroom battles reigniting and the toll it might take on her sense of security in the home we'd carved out together since the divorce. Driving home through the afternoon traffic that clogged the streets around rush hour, I wrestled with the dilemma of escalation versus restraint, pondering whether to pull back from the online fray to safeguard our stability or double down with a more targeted strike that would expose the premeditated undercurrents hinted at in that anonymous forum post about financial levers Emily might be pulling on Tom to distance him from us, all while the radio droned on about local families bonding over holiday getaways that only heightened the irony of our fractured situation. That evening, after scooping Lily up from her after-school program where she'd spent the day learning about simple machines in science class and proudly demonstrated a lever made from popsicle sticks over dinner, we settled into a routine of homework and her favorite cartoon episodes, her innocent quip about how villains in the shows always got cartoonishly foiled making me chuckle despite the storm clouds gathering in my thoughts. A moment of levity that underscored why I couldn't let this slide without some form of poetic justice that stayed within the bounds of cleverness rather than outright destruction. Inspired by the airport's role in the original betrayal, I decided on a subtle yet satisfying revenge ploy by contacting the airline's customer service under the guise of a follow-up concern from the incident, weaving a narrative of ongoing emotional distress for the child involved and suggesting they prepare a special welcome-back protocol for the returning group to ensure no future oversights, a request that the sympathetic representative logged with notes about reviewing the gate footage internally and possibly issuing a formal advisory letter upon their arrival, the kind that would turn their homecoming into an awkward interrogation laced with bureaucratic politeness rather than outright accusation. As Lily brushed her teeth upstairs, humming a tune from the show about sneaky foxes outsmarted by clever rabbits, I allowed myself a private grin at the imagery of Emily's face falling when confronted with paperwork instead of palm fronds. A witty inversion of their Disney escape that felt earned without crossing into malice, though a moral qualm nagged at me during the quiet hours after bedtime, questioning if involving the airline veered too close to weaponizing Lily's trauma for my own satisfaction and whether the audience in my head, those imagined family court judges or neighborhood gossips, would see it as protective fierceness or petty escalation. The qualm deepened Saturday afternoon as I folded laundry in the living room with the windows open to the crisp fall breeze carrying scents of burning leaves from nearby yards, Lily occupied with a puzzle on the floor that depicted a whimsical farm scene far removed from our urban tensions, when a knock echoed at the front door revealing Jenna, Tom's cousin from the Cleveland suburbs who had always been the more level-headed branch of the family tree despite her own history of navigating a contentious divorce a few years back. She stood there with 2 steaming mugs of takeout coffee from the corner shop as a peace offering, her expression a mix of hesitation and determination as she stepped inside and settled on the couch, launching into an explanation that the anonymous forum hint had come from her after overhearing Emily's heated phone calls during pre-trip planning sessions where she boasted about using the Disney outing to force Tom into renegotiating child support downward by demonstrating his commitment to the family's core without the distractions of shared custody obligations. Jenna pulled out her phone to show printed screenshots of emails exchanged between Emily and a family financial advisor, detailing strategies to leverage Tom's guilt over past indiscretions, a vague reference to an old affair he'd buried during our marriage. in order to pressure him into signing off on reduced payments that would alleviate Emily's own mounting debts from a failed business venture, revelations that painted the abandonment not as a fluke, but as a calculated maneuver to isolate Lily and me while tightening the family's grip on his resources. As she spoke, Lily wandered in from her room, tilting her head curiously at the serious tones before piping up with a humorous aside about how puzzles were like family secrets because sometimes pieces got hidden under the couch, diffusing the gravity just enough to let me breathe, but Jenna's info left me reeling with the depth of the betrayal, a web of manipulation that made my earlier revenges seem tame and ignited a fiercer determination to unravel it further. Even as she warned that confronting them directly upon their return could unleash Emily's counterattack with that long-held secret, leaving the air thick with uncertainty as the afternoon light faded and the first hints of their flight schedule appeared on my tracking app, promising a collision course that neither side could fully anticipate. Sunday morning brought a deceptive serenity to our home as the first hints of winter nipped at the edges of the autumn warmth, with Lily insisting on a pancake breakfast shaped like the puzzle pieces from yesterday's activity. Her enthusiasm for turning ordinary meals into games a bomb against the revelations Jenna had dropped like stones in still water the previous afternoon. Ripples that had kept me tossing through the night as I contemplated the full scope of Emily's machinations involving Tom's buried affair and the financial stranglehold she aimed to tighten through this twisted Disney ploy. While Lily flipped her creations at the stove under my watchful eye, chattering about how syrup could make anything magical even without a theme park, I confided in Jenna via text about the airline advisory I'd set in motion. Her reply swift and supportive with an offer to collaborate on amplifying the truth without dragging innocent cousins into the fray, a partnership that felt like arming myself with an insider's map to navigate the minefield of family secrets that threatened to upend the custody equilibrium I'd battled for in courtrooms filled with stern judges and weary mediators. By midday, with Lily settled for a nap after our backyard swing session where she pretended the chains were roller coaster tracks minus the abandonment drama, Jenna arrived unannounced with her laptop in tow. The two of us hunkering down at the kitchen table over mugs of herbal tea that steamed against the cooling air seeping through the window panes, brainstorming a digital takedown that would expose the hypocrisies at the heart of their trip without naming names outright, but letting the details paint a damning portrait for anyone connected to the dots. We crafted the post meticulously on a larger platform known for viral family sagas, the kind where middle-aged folks from Ohio to Florida shared rants about in-law intrusions and vacation betrayals, titling it something innocuous yet intriguing about families who traded heart for headlines at the happiest place on earth. Then layering in anonymized elements from Jenna's email screenshots like references to ants leveraging old skeletons to slash support strings and boarding gates turned into battle lines for loyalty tests, interspersed with humorous jabs at how some mouse ears came with strings attached tighter than a budget motel reservation. I added a touch of that inner sarcasm bubbling up like overbrewed coffee, thinking how Emily's polished social feeds of poolside poses would curdle under the scrutiny of strangers, labeling her the villainess in a real-life fairy tale gone sour. Hitting publish with a shared exhale that carried the thrill of complicity and the undercurrent of what the heck are we doing apprehension, especially since Jenna mentioned Tom's growing isolation in Orlando calls where he'd confided his regret, but fear of Emily's backlash kept him silent. The thread ignited faster than we'd anticipated, comments pouring in by early afternoon with empathy from single parents echoing my plight and witty memes cropping up that depicted forgotten luggage with teary eyes. The momentum building to shares across networks that likely pinged devices in their resort room, turning what should have been a carefree day of parades and princess meet and greets into a siege of notifications and whispered accusations among the group. Tom's frantic voicemail arrived as Lily woke refreshed and we embarked on a craft project involving glittery pipe cleaners twisted into animal shapes, his tone a mix of pleading and panic about the online storm reaching their hotel concierge, who had pulled them aside for a discreet chat courtesy of the airline's proactive review. Emily apparently unraveling in real time with demands for him to track down the poster and issue denials that only fueled the fire further. I returned his call later while tucking away the crafts, keeping my voice even as I probed for admissions on the affair leverage Jenna had illuminated, and he crumbled partially. Admitting Emily had dangled the threat during trip planning to coerce his alignment, but swearing it was bluff and unrelated to Lily's exclusion. A confession laced with the kind of desperation that made me inwardly scoff at the tangled mess of half-truths propping up their family facade like a house of cards in a stiff breeze. The light vulgarity of the situation struck me then, how these so-called adults schemed like teenagers over prom dates while my daughter paid the emotional toll. But the satisfaction of the digital reckoning warmed me as Jenna texted updates confirming the group's mid-trip collapse, with Emily storming off to the spa in a huff and cousin siding with Tom in hushed poolside debates that fractured their unity beyond repair. Yet the twist unraveled in a late evening email from an unknown sender, traced later to Emily's work contact, containing a scanned letter from years ago hinting at my own overlooked detail from the marriage. A minor financial omission on my end during the divorce settlement that she threatened to weaponize in retaliation, a personal secret surfacing like a ghost from the past that made my hands tremble as I deleted it hastily, wondering if this escalation had invited demons I'd long buried, and whether the impending airport confrontation upon their landing would expose fractures in my armor too, leaving the night heavy with the promise of revelations that could redefine everything we'd built in the shadow of betrayal. Tuesday arrived with the kind of crisp Ohio clarity that belied the turmoil churning inside me as I waved Lily off to school with her lunchbox packed full of apple slices and cheese sticks shaped like stars to chase away any lingering shadows from the weekend's revelations. Her backpack bouncing as she boarded the bus, while I lingered on the porch steps, phone in hand, tracking the inbound flight from Orlando that carried Tom, Emily, and the rest of the splintering clan back to the reality they'd tried to escape through ticket stubs and souvenir mugs. The digital threads Jenna and I had woven now a viral web, ensnaring their reputations with comments that ranged from sympathetic nods to sharp-witted takedowns mocking the irony of a family quest for magic ending in public pillory. The morning stretched interminably at work, where I processed claims about storm-damaged roofs and slip-and-fall incidents that paled against the personal tempest I'd unleashed, stealing moments to refresh news feeds where the story had morphed into a cautionary tale picked up by local parenting blogs, complete with blurred recreations of the gate scene that stirred a mix of vindication and queasiness in my gut as colleagues unknowingly echoed sentiments about entitled in-laws deserving a comeuppance. Yet the ethical twinge grew sharper when I imagined Lily overhearing playground whispers about our family drama that could paint me as the instigator rather than the avenger. By early afternoon, with the flight status shifting to landed, I made the impulsive decision to head to the airport not for confrontation, but for quiet observation. Slipping into the arrivals lounge in a nondescript jacket and sunglasses that felt absurdly cloak and dagger amid the flow of reuniting families hugging over lost baggage. Positioning myself near the exit doors where the baggage carousel hummed like a conveyor of impending doom, heart thumping in rhythm with the announcements overhead. They emerged in a disheveled cluster that shattered the polished image from their social posts, Tom at the fore with a suitcase dragging behind him like an anchor, while Emily, flanked by the cousins, muttered into her phone, their faces etched with the exhaustion of a vacation derailed by constant pings and sidelong glances from fellow travelers who recognized the viral faces. A far cry from the carefree snapshots of Splash Mountain splashes and character breakfasts that had once symbolized their unity. Spotting me leaning against a pillar, Tom halted abruptly, his expression cycling through surprise, resignation, and a flicker of something almost like relief as he approached with the group trailing warily. Emily's eyes narrowing into slits that promised retaliation, while Evelyn brought up the rear with a defeated slump to her shoulders that spoke volumes about the in-flight reckonings Jenna had hinted at during our last check-in. I straightened, keeping my voice low and laced with that wry humor that masked the deeper hurt, remarking how the airport seemed to hold a special fondness for our family gatherings, given the last time we'd all converged here under such circumstances. A quip that drew uneasy chuckles from the cousins, but elicited a sharp intake from Emily, who accused me outright of orchestrating the online nightmare that had turned their trip into a gauntlet of stares and whispers, even at the resort gates where staff had pulled Tom aside for a pointed discussion on child welfare protocols. Tom intervened with a hushed plea for privacy, pulling me to a quieter alcove near the coffee stand where the scent of over-roasted beans mingled with the tension, confessing in fragmented sentences how Emily's leverage over his old affair. That one night lapse during a business trip 5 years into our marriage, which I'd forgiven, but never fully forgotten, had escalated into demands for him to endorse her plan to minimize support payments by staging Lily's exclusion as an accident that would justify custody tweaks in her favor, admissions that poured out like a dam breaking and confirmed every suspicion Jenna's leaks had planted. Yet they carried the weight of his genuine remorse, mingled with fear of her exposing the details to mutual acquaintances that could tarnish his sales career built on trust. The final revenge unfolded organically in that moment, as I handed him a printed compilation of the most damning thread comments, not with triumph, but a measured calm that invited him to see the fractures his silence had wrought, suggesting he confront Emily right there amid the bustle to reclaim his role as father before the cycle poisoned Lily further, a clever nudge that prompted him to turn back to the group with a voice steadier than I'd heard in years, demanding she drop the threats and apologize publicly for the gate fiasco that had scarred more than just a child's day. Chaos erupted in hushed tones as Emily lashed out with accusations of betrayal against Tom and sabotage from me, but Evelyn stepped forward unexpectedly, her voice trembling yet firm as she revealed her own complicity in staying silent to preserve family holidays, but now insisting on change, a twist that saw the cousins nodding in alliance and Emily isolated in her fury, storming toward the exit alone while the others lingered in stunned disarray, their world collapsing not with a bang, but a whimper of realizations too long deferred. Driving home through the gathering dusk with the airport lights fading in my rearview, satisfaction bloomed warm and witty in the knowledge that I dismantled their scheme without a single raised voice or legal filing. Yet the ambiguity settled like evening fog as I pondered the cost. Would Tom's partial redemption hold, or would Emily's grudge fester into custody wars that dragged Lily through more depositions and visitations, and had my choices, however justified, modeled revenge over reconciliation for the daughter who deserved untainted magic in her life, leaving questions unanswered about whether the scales of justice tipped toward healing or just deeper scars in the fabric of our fractured kin.